Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to see so many of you here tonight. Thank you so much for coming to the event. My name is Laura Dent. I'm an Associate Director in the Extended Education Unit at LSE, and I lead LSE Online. Now, we founded LSE Online in 2017 with a first couple of courses designed to provide impactful, insightful learning to professional learners around the world and to help support people in their career development. We're developing courses all the time, so I think we now total about 33 online certificate courses and masterclasses in the portfolio. We've recently launched 2 new sustainability courses, a short course in sustainability, environment, economy and society, and a masterclass that's focused on sustainability communications. So I found out today that I think we've supported almost 40,000 learners around the world with our short course portfolio. So you're part of a very large professional network. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, so please do come and join the community. We're quite active on there, and we like to hear from our learners about how they're experiencing the courses. And if you do want to tweet about tonight's event, then please do use the hashtag, which is on the screen, LSE Online Networking. Now, tonight's event is split into 2 parts. So the event will start with a lecture and a Q&A session from Dr. Juanita Gonzalez-Uribe, who is the Associate Professor in LSE's Department of Finance. Juanita is also the course convener on the Entrepreneurial Finance short course, so I'm sure some of you will recognize her. And she will be discussing the emerging research that underscores the capability gaps amongst entrepreneurs and how the importance of early-stage support institutions like business accelerators can help bridge those gaps. Once we've had Juanita's expertise and we've had a chance to talk about some questions and answers, we'll then make our way to the new Marshall building, which is just across the road, where we can have the networking reception, and that's just a bit of a chance for you to network and to meet your fellow professional learners. So before I kick things off, I do have a couple of housekeeping requests. If you do hear the fire alarm, then please make your way to the fire exit at the back, and the team will help guide you safely out of the building. We're also recording the event, so we would really appreciate it if you could just keep your phones on silent. And we do have a photographer taking pictures of the event tonight. So if you don't want to be featured in those photos for whatever reason, then please just let one of the team know. Okay, so without further ado, we can formally kick off tonight, and I will hand over to Juanita. Juanita, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Let me just... Which is the one? There you go. Got it. 10 years here, and I still don't know how to do it. Anyway, well, thank you all for being here tonight. I'm super happy to see you. It's great to have professional learners at the LSE, so I love seeing you here. The title of my talk is Bridging the Development Gap, the Role of High Growth Businesses. And I am the Associate Professor in Finance at the LSE, but I'm also co-director of Financing the Real Economy at the Financial Markets Group, which is a research center that we have in the finance department. And before I start with my talk, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from Colombia, a beautiful country. I did my undergrad in math and economics over there at the Universidad de los Andes, my alma mater. Then I did my PhD in finance and economics at Columbia University. Notice the difference in spelling, Columbia University in New York, so not back home. And then I came here at the LSE. This was my first job, and I've stayed here ever since, and now I'm an associate professor. And what do I do for research? My research is on entrepreneurship and innovation. Those are like the broad questions or subjects that I like to study. And I'm in the finance department, so that means that I also care a lot about how we finance entrepreneurship and how we finance innovation. And so that means that I also take a look at venture capital, private equity, and different sources of alternative financing that are very popular in that space. If you're interested in learning more about this sort of research here at the LSE, that's my webpage. But of course, you can also go to the finance department webpage and take a look at all my colleagues. Anyway, let's go back to the talk. So I'm going to talk today about the development gap. I'm going to define that in a minute. And then I'm also going to talk about high-growth businesses, again, to be defined. So let me start by introducing what do I mean by development gap. And let me start with like an unquestionable fact. So we know that some countries are much richer than others. And there's many ways in which we can take a look at that. So start by looking at the plot to the right. And what I have here is the global income distribution. This is in 2020. And the x-axis, which you can see, is the per capita monthly income. And this is in euro. And then what we've done here is we basically split it across regions around the world. So you have, in orange, you have sub-Saharan Africa. You go all the way down here to blue, which is North America. And what this plot is meant to tell you is if you happen to live in North America, then on average, your per capita monthly income, that's like roughly 3,000 euro. Instead, if you happen to be sub-Saharan Africa, well, that number is closer to 250 euros. The x-axis will scale it such that what you see below in the color below each of the plots is basically accounts for the population in those regions. So we have this big disparities in terms of income. We have some countries that are richer than others. And of course, as you would imagine, a large part of economics research is about why this happens. Now, you can think about this problem in many ways. And depending on the sort of research you do, you'll come up with different pieces of the puzzle. So you could think of part of this being driven by differences in institutions. So maybe the legal system, for example, in the US is very different from the legal system that you have in sub-Saharan Africa, and perhaps that's a very important explanation to that. You can also think about education. There's lots of people in the education economics literature that they think about the cognitive and non-cognitive skills that individuals have and that they can, acquire when they're at school. And perhaps that also explains why some countries are richer and grow faster than others. But I'm a financial economist. And what that means is that when I look at this plot, beyond other explanations, I also want to understand what's happening from the business perspective. Could there be something happening in the way that businesses evolve in different countries, and can that help explain why we see this big disparity? So the business story, or one business stake from this plot, is to consider what happens to businesses over their life cycle. And we have very interesting research that shows that a symptom of the development disease, or this disease, or this development gap, is the lower speed at which the average business grows over its life cycle. What do I mean with that? Let's take a look at the plot. So in this plot, in the x-axis, what you have there is businesses according to their age. So the first point here would be all the young businesses. Their age is less than 5 years in terms of how long has it been since the incorporation, all the way to businesses that are old, in the sense that they've been incorporated for more than 40 years. And what we're looking here is at their growth in terms of employment. And we're comparing 3 different countries. I'm going to start with what I would say is an example of a developed economy, that would be the US. As you can see, as the business ages, you can see an interesting growth, on average, in employment. Now this is something, that you don't see as much when you focus on other countries. For example, let's take a look at Mexico. Mexico is not too different from the US when you go from businesses that are below 5 years old to businesses between 5 and 9 years of age. But from then onwards, you see this big divergence in the path of the average growth of a business in the different economies. And let's not even focus on India. You can see how different the paths between the businesses are. So when you think about the development problem and you think about it from the perspective of businesses, it seems that one particular thing that is explaining part of this development problem is how different the experience of business growth is across the different countries. Now, moreover, if you dig more deeply, what you find is that in fact, there's very interesting heterogeneity. Let me try to explain that. And I'm going to use other data. I'm going to compare Colombia, which is my country, to the US. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is in the plot to the left, I'm going to replicate the plot that I just showed you, but for Colombia and the US. So on the x-axis, I have, again, businesses according to their age. Very young, older. And in the y-axis, what we have there is, again, the average employment. And as we saw for the comparison between the US, Mexico, and India, you can see that in the US, businesses, they just grow faster in terms of their employment on average than in Colombia. So, same pattern applies. But now I'm going to break the data more. And I'm going to ask, is this true for the median business? Because I'm telling you here, on average, this is. But is this true for the median business? Or is the fact that the two countries grow in terms of the average business very differently explained instead by certain types of businesses, not the median business? Let's take a look. That's what you see in the plot to the right. Now, what I have done here is I've basically classified businesses into three types. We have the median business. Think of it as the representative business in the US and in Colombia. And then now pick also the top growers. Imagine the fastest growing businesses in the US. Think of Google, think of Facebook, and think, if you can, about the fastest growing businesses in Colombia. You may not be from Colombia, an example would be Rappi. Now, what do you see here? The median businesses are not very different across Colombia and the US. Turns out the representative business is very similar. I was very surprised when I saw this. But what explains the difference between Colombia and the US? Here's the big difference. In the US, there's a much higher probability you will see a Facebook, you will see a Google, you will see a unicorn. In Colombia, these guys are relatively missing. You can see that here, you see this increase. In Colombia, you don't see that. Now, what are these parts? Well, in the x-axis, what you have is, again, the age of the business. In the y-axis, what I'm plotting is how fast they grow. And what you can see is that it's the high-growth, young businesses that appear to be missing in developing countries. So, big question, why do some countries grow more than others? Well, part of the explanation has to do with how businesses grow over the life cycle. Importantly, it's not about the median business. Those seem to be very similar across countries. If we take these plots as given, it appears as if that part of the explanation of why some countries grow more than others is the fact that, for example, in Colombia and in other more underdeveloped economies, we just don't have enough superstar, high-growth, young firms. Why? Why does that happen? Before we get to that, let me characterize these high-growth businesses a bit more. I've told you they exist more in the US than what they do in Colombia. What characteristics do they exhibit? Well, first, they're very young. They are in the top 1 or 5 percentiles of growth. I've been calling them high-growth businesses, but you can also, you may have heard of them by other monikers. Gazelles, superstar firms, even unicorns to some extent. Now, they're few in number. This is almost by definition. They're very likely to fail. But survivors, and this is the important bit, can end up disproportionately contributing to the economy. Another important characteristic is that they tend to finance themselves in a very special way. These businesses are disproportionately more likely to raise financing not from a bank, but rather from private equity. You can think of venture capital funds, business angels. These are the ones that tend to be backing these businesses. Now, when I say that they disproportionately contribute to the economy, what do I mean with that? Well, even though less than 1% of companies ever raise venture capital in the US, And 66% of those that do fail, the ones that survive, contribute to roughly 76% of market capitalization in that country. And you can see that in this table, where you basically take all the companies that have been public in the US and you split them into two. Those that raised venture capital financing at some point and those that didn't. And then you compare these two groups of companies and you figure out how much they explain of a certain subject. So for example, let's take a look at total market capitalization. Again, those companies that are publicly listed and that were backed by a venture capitalist account for roughly 76% of market capitalization. But look at this very intriguing data point. They also account for almost 90% of research and development expenses. So this is what's missing in Colombia. We don't have enough of this. Why could that be? Well, many reasons. One reason could be, well, we just don't have enough VCs, right? The venture capital investors that are backing these companies. That's a potential explanation. Another potential explanation is that we don't have enough high growth potential ideas. Turns out that most of the brilliant business people, where are they? Oh, they happen to be in the US. I happen to not believe that. I think talent is equally distributed in the population. But opportunities for developing that talent, that may not be distributed equally. So what I want to propose today is one potential explanation as to why higher growth businesses are missing in developing economies. And while many exist, I want to propose one. And this particular explanation has to do with something that we call capability gaps. What do I mean with that? If markets work efficiently, meaning anyone that has a good idea is able to find the funding and the inputs that are needed to transform that idea into a great business, right? If we're in that sort of an economy, then, well, in practice, entrepreneurs with good business ideas should be able to take any idea and convert it into a high growth business, as long as that idea has enough potential. However, in practice, entrepreneurs with good business ideas, right? So again, this equal distribution of talent, I'm thinking of that in terms of ideas, may not be able to attract capital. They may not be even able to attract inputs. This first part is what we typically call a financial constraint, right? And not being able to attract input, that could just be a problem of the labor market. This could be happening. In addition to that, even when entrepreneurs have access to funding, so throw cash at them, and even when they have access to these inputs that you need for production, so a good team, one thing that entrepreneurs may lack is the know-how of how to combine everything that you need to convert a business idea into a truly high-growth company. That is what I mean with capability gaps. Now let me give you a couple of examples. What exactly is a capability gap when you're talking about high-growth businesses? Well, let's start with this one. So when you come to countries like Colombia, like mine, you will often hear the following story from an entrepreneur. I have a great idea. I was able to get some funding. Perhaps I have a great team, but I cannot get that key business connection because I don't know that person. And I don't know anyone that can introduce me to that person. In economies that are underdeveloped, and even in developed ones, connections matter. Why is that? Because there's lots of information asymmetries. It's very hard for me to judge, are you going to be a good client? I have no clue. Will you pay on time? I don't know. So how do we bridge that problem? Well, we rely on connections. If someone vouches for you, or if you're introduced by someone that I know, et cetera, then I am more likely to buy your product. I'm more likely to become your client. So if the entrepreneur doesn't have the key business connection it needs, it may have money, it may have a team, it may have a high potential idea, but it will not become that high growth business that can help bridge the development gap. Another very simple example, but I see it all the time. A problem of pitching and knowing how to fundraise. So when you talk to venture capital investors, for example, in the UK, that are thinking about investing in businesses in Colombia, What do I often hear them say? Well, this person came along, showed a pitch deck like an entrepreneur would, and I have no clue what they were talking about. And this has nothing to do with language. They can have perfect English. The problem is that we're not talking the same business speak. And the reason for that is learning how to invest in the venture capital world is difficult. You have very little information about the business. You have no projections on cash flows. And so as an investor, what do? You develop the skill of pattern recognition. So you say, okay, companies that look like this, and I have a couple of rules of thumb, right? The market is this big, this is the sort of traction they're showing, I know are similar to this successful case studies, therefore, this is the sort of valuation that I think this business has deserved, and I may or may not invest. But Colombians don't know this, or the average entrepreneur in the economy, even if this person has high growth potential idea, because they have limited opportunities to interact with VCs. So they can create a pitch deck, but when they come and talk to the venture capital investor, they will potentially be showing all the wrong things that the VC is not interested in. So even if the market calculation would be good, and even if the traction that the VC is expecting is being satisfied, it's not being shown. And therefore, the entrepreneur is not able to raise financing. So there's this notion that there's some capabilities out there that entrepreneurs don't have. Why is that? Many of these require learning by doing. It's not something you learn in a book. It's not something you may learn with me online. You have to go through the experience. And then you learn. Right? You go through a VC, the VC says, I'm not interested in this. I would have wanted to know your market calculation. I would have wanted to know the traction measured like this or that. Great, you learn, and next time you present, now you know what to show. But unless you go through the experience, there's no learning. So, what can you do? What to do? Can we fill capability gaps by training high potential entrepreneurs? In fact, one step before that, can we identify the entrepreneurs that have high potential in the economy? Is this something that we can even do? There's so much information problems. Can we do that? And if we identify them and we train them, can this help solve the development problem? Or should we do something else? So to answer that question, what we did, we partnered with Valle E, which is a business accelerator in Colombia. And I'll tell you more about what they are in a couple of slides. So here's my case study with Valle E. This was a collaboration between the LSE and Valle E. We're going after these questions with my co-author Santiago. Let me tell you a little bit about Valle E, then I'll tell you a little bit about business accelerators, and then I'll tell you about what we found. So here's Valle E. This is the context. So this is a program that is located in Cali. This is the third largest city in Colombia. This is an important thing to know. If you don't come from Latin America, you may not know this, but typically in Latin America, opportunities are highly concentrated on the capital city. If you're not in Bogotá in Colombia, it's going to be hard for you to find funding, to find the right team, to find the right opportunities. So these guys are starting in the third city. It's a great city, but compared to Bogotá, fewer opportunities. Now, what do they want to do? The main objective is to unlock, as they've said, the high growth potential of local entrepreneurs. So they're looking for exactly the people that I want to find, those that have high potential. And then what are they going to do? They're going to offer them some services. Let me be precise. They will provide no cash. All they're going to do is they're going to offer 3 types of what I call non-monetary services. Not in the sense that they're not costly. This is costly for the program. In the sense that they don't involve some cash being given to the entrepreneur. What are these services? First, standardized group training. Everyone goes to class and learns about financing. Second, customized advice. That means every company gets a mentor, actually 2 mentors. The first mentor helps with the day-to-day operations of the business, how to stop fires. The second mentor is about strategic vision, how to grow, how to think about your sales channel, who's your customer, etc. Finally, visibility in events and magazines. Think back to the point of connections. The people behind Valle E is what is known as a Chamber of Commerce in Colombia. And it's basically a group of business people. They get together And so there's a lot of connections happening in that place. Now, what exactly is the program? It's a fixed-term program, so it's 3 months. It's cohort-based, so every batch, they take a bunch of firms. In this case, 35, this was the pilot. They target young firms. Remember that we're talking about young firms. Those are the ones that really matter for this development gap. What does young mean in this context? Less than 3 years relative to incorporation. And in fact, you can apply with only a business idea. You don't have to be a firm yet, okay? The only important thing is you have to exhibit the desire for higher growth. So to give you an example, some of the companies that applied were more like a t-shirt company. That would not satisfy the high growth potential requirement that they had. Examples of businesses that were accepted, lots of apps, lots of fintech related businesses. So this is sort of business that is applying to this program. Okay, they really are after high growth. Now, business accelerators, what are they? Is Valle a weird thing that's happening in Cali, Colombia? No. These types of programs have become very popular over time. In this plot, what you have is the number of participants in accelerators. Everything started in 2005 with Y Combinator. You may have heard of them. They've now become a seed fund, but they were accelerator at the beginning. And today, well, last year, here's 2021, you can see the number of participants has grown massively. Now, this is not only happening in Colombia or in Silicon Valley, it's all over the world. Now, where are they when you think about the development stage of a company? When exactly do you go to an accelerator? So typically, and this is on average what happens, but of course there's exceptions to this tale, you may have an idea, you're thinking about a prototype. How do you do that? Well, you may bootstrap, meaning you use your own resources. You can raise money from family or friends. Once you have something that is similar to a prototype, what do you look for? A business model, right? Like, how could I potentially sell this? That's when you typically go to an accelerator, at this point. And like Valle, they tend to be academies, in the sense that they typically are training entrepreneurs and are providing all these non-monetary resources that I just explained. Of course, they differ in exactly what they do, but that's the idea. Once you have your business model, this is when, for example, you could access a business angel financing or seed investment. So you've got your business model, but you have to show traction. Because no traction, very unlikely you're going to get venture capital, which is what happens at the end. So the businesses that are applying to Valle are somewhere here. And in fact, remember, some are even here, okay? And it's not a weird thing, it's quite common. And in fact, they've become so common that they're typically described as the schools for entrepreneurs. And they do share lots of aspects relative to, say, schools for managers, like MBAs, right? There's some know-how that is being provided. You're going to this group training, you're learning from your peers, you're learning potentially from the instructor, one would hope. In addition to that, there could be some certification, right? You go to the LSE, you can tell everyone I've been to the LSE. Likewise, if you're accepted to Y Combinator, that's a real feat. And you can walk around saying, I'm a Y Combinator alumni. There's some self-validation. You're accepted at the LSE, you're like, yes, I can do this. Likewise, it's going to happen in Accelerator. And finally, there's some structure accountability, right? You have to do all this homework, you have to work in groups, you have to submit things on time, make sure you do the final project, the exam, etc. Likewise, in a business accelerator, you have something very similar. You have regular meetings, and very importantly, everything ends with a demo day, where you pitch in front of investors. So that's the context, but this is happening in Colombia. So let's go back to what we learned. Because what we did was, we started out by thinking, can there be any effect from participating in this program? And I'm starting in Cali. Can I identify high potential? Can we make a difference by providing stuff that is not cash related? So what did we find? Some lessons. Lesson 1. Participation indeed leads to higher average business growth. Now, we are very careful in terms of trying to tease out what I would call the causal effect of the program versus any potential selection effects of the program. Meaning, I want to make sure that what I'm saying here is the following. By participating in the program and receiving all these non-monetary resources, the business benefits and increases its growth rate. What's not happening here is Valle was great at selecting, and these businesses would have grown regardless. And all I'm showing you here is the greater ability that Valle has in identifying the really good companies in the economy that, with or without resources, would have grown anyway. So I have in the background an empirical strategy trying to tease out those two things, just to be clear. So anyway, the point here is, if you go through the program, imagine you're randomly selected from the population. On average, there's going to be an increase. How much? Well, within 3 years, there's going to be an average annual increase in business growth of 166%. Now, is this big? Is this small? Well, these are revenues, by the way. I didn't mention it. And of course, these are small businesses. So if you add one more customer, and you originally had one, right, you've basically doubled the number of customers you have. So some of this is explained by that, by a problem with scale, if you want. So we also asked, okay, fine, let me ask the following. If I compare the businesses that went through the program with the rest of the businesses in Colombia, is there any chance that the program has been able to push the participant to be one of those top growers that I showed you before, among the top 3% of growers in the country? The answer is yes. Participating in the program increases the probability. So this is not just I doubled my customers from 1 to 2, but there's a massive effect in terms of pushing businesses into that part where where there's missing companies. I'm filling that with a small program. Second lesson. However, as always in economics, there's always a but. This average effect masks substantial heterogeneity, which is very interesting. What do I mean with that? Imagine that you take the businesses that participated in the program and you rank them from those that, at the moment of application, seem to have the lowest potential for growth to the ones that seem to have the highest potential for growth. Now, when I say seem, what do I mean with that? Businesses submit an online application. You have reviewers that go through the applications, and they score the businesses. So when I seem to have, what I mean really is I'm ranking businesses based on their score. It's a perception from the reviewers. But let's assume we do this. And then I ask, this average increase of 166%, is it common across all firms, regardless of their potential? Is it explained by the ones that were not so great at the time of application? Or is it instead concentrated on those firms that exhibited the highest potential of application? And the answer is, the effect comes from the right tail. So those companies that, when they applied, didn't seem to have that high potential based on what reviewers thought, they don't benefit. There's really no change, basically a zero. When the effect kicks in is when you consider the businesses that application had the highest growth potential as perceived by reviewers. So what's really the message here? Yes, business accelerators can help unleash high growth if they've selected properly those businesses that indeed have this highest growth potential. Now, what does high growth potential mean in Colombia? To be precise, in Cali, Colombia. Those were the businesses that appeared more innovative, that appeared more scalable, and that, importantly, had some market-validated products. So most of the applicants that applied with a business idea, not much happened. And in fact, the vast majority pivoted and changed entirely what they were doing, which is also great. You want people to focus on what has the biggest potential. But here we're measuring things at the firm level, not at the individual level. Finally, why did this happen? We gave them 3 things, right? Training, customized advice, and networking, and some potential certification. The strength of the project is not figuring that out. We don't have variation on who received what. But we asked them. And unequivocally, they all said, group training has no effect, which is not great. But customized advice does. But this goes really well with the notion of capability gaps. I already told you. Why don't you have those capabilities? Because you have to learn on the go. If you could obtain this from a book and from someone that is just, regurgitating what they saw in the book, you could have done this on your own. What the program really gives you is someone that can teach you along the way, right? Teach you how to do things because they have the experience, because they understand concepts that you don't. So this goes really well with the notion of what a capability gap is. Now, this result, you may think, oh, that's just Valle and this weird experiment that Colombia and Juanita conducted in the middle of nowhere. Not true. There's growing evidence that accelerators can play that role in the economy. They help identify entrepreneurs with high growth potential. Not a small feat. There's a lot of information asymmetries. But as long as you have good people in the team, it's not every accelerator, but some accelerators do. So that's the first thing they do. They identify. Second thing they do, they help fill capability gaps that can exist. So they level the playing field. And finally, I don't have time to talk about that today, but they also have spillover effects in the sense that once an accelerator locates in a particular region, not only the entrepreneurs that participate in the program benefit, other entrepreneurs around it benefit as well. Why is that? What's the economic story behind it? Well, investors that are thinking about investing in a particular region, once an accelerator comes along, the cost of investing in that region goes down because the accelerator is figuring out what's the good talent, so that helps the VCs, and they're also training them. So they're more likely to take a look at that region, and that spills over to other entrepreneurs in the area. Okay, so there's this spillover effects that they have. Now, in terms of impact, after our project, the Valle program was scaled at the national level. Now it's being replicated in 9 other Colombian regions. We have a bit more credibility with the government, so now they're letting us run experiments. And perhaps in a couple of years, I may have more to say about what exactly is it that really drives the results. Interested to know more? That's the access to my paper. We've also created a video. If you don't want to read, I'm with you. It's a short video. And if you want to learn more about business accelerators in general, not only the Valle experience, this is a report I wrote with IKEA, and we focus both on for-profit accelerators and also more like socially minded accelerators as well. So conclusions? The development problem is one of the most pressing questions in economics research, and I would say in general. High growth businesses, which are often missing outside the developed world, can play a role in bridging that gap. Hopefully I've convinced you today that capability gaps among high potential entrepreneurs help explain why those businesses are missing in countries like mine, like Colombia. But the good news is that training programs, like business accelerators, can help fill those capability gaps and therefore can have a very important effect in unleashing high growth potential in developed countries. That's all I have to say. Thank you. So now we have time for some questions, if you have them. The question here. They're going to come with a mic. I'll bring my mic.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask you if also the financial market, how is it developed in Colombia? Because perhaps you don't have the facility that you have in countries like here, where you have a family office, or you have a VC, or a private bank even, that kind of people who facilitate the flow of capital from investors to new ideas.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Thank you for bringing it up. So, let me say 2 things about that. 1, Cali, Colombia, is not exactly a hotbed of venture capital. I wrote recently a report for the World Bank on venture capital in Latin America, and while Colombia ranks, I think, 4th place, Cali is nowhere near the top. So you're absolutely true. This is a setting in which what we've done is change one part of the puzzle, which is I'm helping, potentially, and I've convinced you, some entrepreneurs that have high growth potential. They were missing some gaps. They had some gaps, some capabilities. We've helped fill them. But you're absolutely certain we can do a lot of that. But unless you have a market, a financial market that is ready to absorb these guys by investing in them or buying their products, then it's going to be very hard for that to be enough to really move the needle. So the second thing I want to say has to do with another experience I have that speaks exactly to that. So there's an accelerator that's called Startup Chile. You may have heard of it. It's probably one of the most famous accelerators. It's publicly backed by guess who? The Chilean government. It's relatively old. It started in 2010 after the earthquake. And it was part of their business policy to really help the country start again after that crisis or tragedy. Now, I worked with them, and we were looking at the impact that the program had had on participants and in general in the population. And what we find was the following. The Chileans that participated in the program, yes, they grew more. Few of them got to venture capital financing. They died along the way. We had a lot of discussions of why could this be happening? And the main reason was the market was not ready. So Startup Chile had trained a Chilean population, because to be clear, Startup Chile accepted both foreigners and locals. So that's why I keep saying the Chileans among the cohort. They had trained some Chileans, but the market was not ready for them. So what did Startup Chile did? They created a fund. And a few years later, this wasn't immediate, because you had to have the evaluation, you had to process, policymakers have to accept it, blah, 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 blah. 5 years down the line, they created a fund. And now Startup Chile is one of the most important investors in terms of number in Latin America. And hopefully, if all goes well, they're going to have great exits. So you're absolutely, yes, it's completely true. What has Colombia done? So remember that Valle E was part of this Chamber of Commerce. So they also have a network of investors. And they've connected the companies, only 35, this was a pilot, with interested investors. But going forward, how do you move that part of the market is also essential, absolutely. Yeah. I think someone here had come.
Thank you for the lecture. It was very fascinating. And I was curious about what impact are online courses, like Coursera offers, Udemy offers, what impact is this democratization of information, like the ability that you can take these courses for free? You can also download pitch decks for free. What impact are you finding is that having globally from your perspective?
Huge impact, and let me not get started with ChatGPT. It has a very important impact, but let me say two things. One, it has an impact, and let me give you an example. So in my Entrepreneurial Finance class, I invite guest speakers, and so I had a bunch of entrepreneurs this term that just passed. One of them is founder of a unicorn fintech company in the UK. He doesn't want to be named, so I will not name him. And I asked him about ChatGPT. Has it had any impact on your business? And he said, look, not in my business model per se, right? We have a way of doing our business, and that it's not affected by ChatGPT yet. But as a fintech company, we typically produce lots of content. We have this LinkedIn reports that we send out about what's happening with fintech in the UK. We have reports that we send out about opportunities for entrepreneurs and what do we see in this space, et cetera, et cetera. All of that, ChatGPT does now. It didn't used to do it before. It wasn't available. So what's my take based on that conversation? I think it has an impact on the way that people do business, and in fact on the way that my students do their projects. But it cannot solve everything. The secret sauce of this company is, after all, in the way that they allocate funds, or allocate loans, etc. And that, as of now, hasn't been affected by that. And so my second point, I think that's very similar when you think about Coursera and other online options that are available. I think that there is something that you can learn from that. There's a lot that to be learned. But events like this this is where you get the extra mileage from. Because you get to meet the person right next to you, and this is the person who's going to give you that connection that you didn't know existed, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where I don't think ChatGPT is there yet. And I think that's where the human component plays a super important role. So my invitation to anyone that takes these types of courses at the LSE is come to these events, right? That's the value add. Yeah.
Hi, Juanita. Thank you. Super presentation. So accelerators, great idea, great concept. How do they spot a potentially high-performing startup? Do they do a POC? Are they that sort of, what's the secret sauce there?
That's a difficult question. And a POC, for those of you that don't know the lingo, it's a people opportunity context, kind of like analysis, where you say, okay, this is a business. Let me figure out who the people are and are they good enough for this type of business? What's the opportunity? So what's exactly what they're trying to sell? What's the business? What's the product? And then, of course, the context, because it does depend on where you are at, what sort of funding is available, whether this is a business that's ready. So that's the POC. So that's context. To answer your very difficult question, let me say two things. One, let me start with data. Not every accelerator is able to do this. Let me just start out by saying that. Some of them can, some of them are less successful. In my research, what I found is that, and this is something that I want to emphasize, and this is both at the selection stage, but also at the impact stage. What I want you to take from this is not every business accelerator works. Let me just come up with a business accelerator because it will smoothly create impact. No. The secret sauce is in the people. And so when you have individuals that have gone through this process before, they've been entrepreneurs themselves, or they are successful investors, or not very successful, but they've been in the business enough. They gain this skill of pattern recognition, where you say, for companies that have this people opportunity context kind of characteristics, this is the likelihood that things will go well, right? That's a skill that not everyone has. This is a skill that only experience gives you, if you're lucky, okay? So I would say accelerators that in their team have individuals with either entrepreneurial experience or with investor experience tend to be more successful in identifying which are the businesses that have the high potential. That's the first thing I want to say. Second thing I want to say, it's difficult in general. If you look at the venture capital numbers, we have some interesting papers by Ramananda at Imperial, where he took they collaborate with a fund. And this is a fund that is probably B or C. So it's advanced entrepreneurs. Don't think of them as seed entrepreneurs. They already have something going on. And then what they did from the fund is they collected information of what happened to the business eventually, like I think 10 years down the line. And they compared that relative to the scores that the partners at the fund had provided for the business when they applied. And they look at a correlation. So those businesses that the fund said, this is a great business, I'm therefore going to provide a high score, are those businesses that really perform down the line? The answer is no. Horrible. It's not predictive at all. And in fact, you see from very well-known, reputed VCs that they're happy to say, or they're happy to inform the world about all the businesses they did not invest in and yet are very successful. So again, one of the guest speakers that I had this term is Felda Hardiman. He is the founder of Bessemer Partners, perhaps one of the most successful company or venture capital funds and private equity funds of all time. And in their webpage, you can take a look, they have something that they call the anti-portfolio. These are all the businesses they considered and that they rejected. If you look at that webpage, you'll be like, fools. Like, very well-known businesses appear there. But they did accept some others that ended up being very successful. So they're very happy, saying, I missed on all of these opportunities, Facebook, Airbnb, Dropbox, Google, everything, but I still have very good returns. Why did I bring this up? I bring this up because of the following. The selection problem of an accelerator is very different from the selection problem of a venture capital fund. Why is that? lots of what an accelerator is doing is making sure to trim the tail. Because accelerators tend to be roughly big programs. When you think about Startup Chile, 100 companies participate every batch. When you think about Y Combinator, they have multiple batches over the same year, and again, like 100 participants. So what is their role? They have to identify high growth for sure, but most of what they do is making sure they don't get the tail. For VCs, the selection problem is quite different. They already have a bunch of companies that are not the tail. And now you have to tell me, of those above the median, which are the ones that are going to be top 1%. That's a harder problem. So I don't think it's conflictive evidence to find, oh, accelerators are apparently better when they have the skill and they have the good capital to do this, that VCs at selecting is just a very different problem, the one we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juanita. That was fascinating, and thank you so much for being generous with your expertise and answering all the questions. I'm sure we would have more if we had more time. So we're now going to move on to the second part of tonight's event, which is the network